Hitler, you probably didn't even hate the Jews. That was just the meth making you crazy, dog.
Both of you, get back in the closet. You deserve a fucking ass whooping. All of you, get back in the closet. Go fuck yourself.
How much does it cost for fascism? How much do the taxpayers have to pay for a fascist country?
They're evil. They are actively doing evil. So treat them like the evil that they are.
The right to exist argument has been used now to the point where what it's going to mean is that the Israel you're talking about will include the annexed and illegally occupied West Bank. It's very interesting, the Israeli government has never said where it thinks the borders of Israel really ought to be and what it would settle for. I think it would be an immense help if it tells us where it thinks Israel's boundaries should be. Every other country does do that.
It's time to stop pretending otherwise. It's time to be ruthless and time to afford them the same amount of grace that they give to their Palestinian victims, because they are only going to get more and more ruthless with their victims if you don't.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the stream. We'll start with headlines and then go into more specific stories.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Trump says he's arranging trilateral talks aimed at ending Russia's war in Ukraine. Trump made the claim after wrapping up a hastily arranged summit at the White House Monday with European and NATO leaders joined by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump promised the U.S. would help guarantee Ukraine's security in any future peace deal with Russia, but said European countries would lead the efforts. Trump did not clarify whether he'd send U.S. forces to Ukrainian soil if necessary. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said Berlin remained open to participating in a peacekeeping mission. He also said the next round of negotiations should come only after Russia and Ukraine agree to a ceasefire.
Let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on.
Trump countered he hopes to move more directly toward a peace deal with Russia, adding, quote, "I don't think you need a ceasefire," unquote. Trump then went on to pause the summit to call Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin later confirmed the roughly 40-minute call, calling it frank and very constructive, without stating if Putin had agreed to meet with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Throughout the day, Trump was friendly and cordial with Zelensky, unlike in February when Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance berated the Ukrainian president before White House aides asked him to leave the White House. Trump's pressing Ukraine to exchange territory for an end to the war, something Zelensky's rejected. Meanwhile, Russia's foreign ministry called the prospect of NATO forces in Ukraine categorically unacceptable. We'll host a debate on Monday's White House summit and Russia's war in Ukraine after headlines. Tens of thousands of Palestinians are fleeing Gaza City as Israel intensifies its attacks on the Gaza Strip's largest population center ahead of a full-scale military invasion. Al Jazeera reports Israeli attacks today have killed at least 26 people, among them 8 Palestinians killed in a strike on tents housing displaced families in Khan Yunis, and another 4 killed in an attack on tents in Deir al-Balah. 2 people were reportedly shot and killed seeking aid at a distribution site run by the notorious Israel and U.S.-backed so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Meanwhile, an airdrop of humanitarian aid over Deir al-Balah on Monday set off a scramble amongst desperately hungry people hoping for a meal. Displaced Palestinian Amin Abu Muksib came away empty-handed.
This is aerial humiliation, not airdropping. The package is filled with about 12 boxes. More than 1,000 people gather on the package. People crush each other, and it's not enough for a single family. People are fighting. There are like 10 fights on each package, and people are dying. Here you hear gunfire. There you find someone dead under the package. We can't take it anymore.
Hamas says it has agreed to a proposal for a 60-day ceasefire that would see it release 10 living hostages and the bodies of 18 dead hostages in return for hundreds of Palestinians being held in Israeli prisons. The proposal is almost identical to an earlier ceasefire plan advanced by the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff. Israeli media report Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dismissed the offer and signaled he still plans to invade Gaza City and forcefully displace its entire population to the southern Gaza Strip. This after on Sunday.
We are at a pivotal moment in history right now. Will we stand up to a fascist dictator who is actively committing genocide and telling us that he plans on doing legitimate straight up ethnic cleansing? Will we stand by and let him do that? Let him brush our nose? I mean, the IDF themselves has said, we continue to do what we do because the world has not stopped us.
Close to 1 million Israelis.
That's why I say, like, that's why me and a lot of other people say that if you haven't distanced yourself or tried to stop it or spoken out against it, you are part of it.
Demanded that Netanyahu not invade Gaza City and agree to a ceasefire and a release of the hostages. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, Islamic State-backed fighters armed with machetes killed at least 52 civilians, including women and children, in the eastern regions of Beni and Lubero. That's according to the UN, which reports that in recent days, ISIL-backed rebels with the Allied Democratic Forces set homes on fire, tied up residents, and attacked them with machetes and hoes. ADF is among several militia groups clashing over land and resources in the mineral-rich eastern DRC. This is a local official from Beni.
This is a genocide happening in silence. Even the international community says nothing. For 11 years already, the population has been victim of these massacres. We must speak to the authorities, international authorities, national authorities, provincial and local authorities, to restore peace. We are tired of massacres of all kinds. We are tired of burying our brothers. We are tired of this carnage.
The latest massacre comes amidst ongoing tensions between the DRC's military and Rwanda-backed M23 rebels, with both sides missing a Monday deadline to reach a final peace agreement during talks brokered by Qatar. Democratic state lawmakers returned to Texas Monday, ending a 2-week walkout that broke quorum in the state legislature and temporarily blocked Republicans from ramming through a new gerrymandered congressional map for Texas at the behest of President Trump. Republican leaders had threatened to arrest or remove from office over 50 Democratic lawmakers who fled Texas earlier this month for Illinois, New York, and other states. On Monday, Texas's Republican Speaker of the House, Dustin Burrows, said Democratic lawmakers lawmakers would only be allowed to leave the House chambers if they agreed to be released into the custody of Texas law enforcement. Democratic State Rep Nicole Collier of Fort Worth was forced to sleep on the floor of Texas's state capitol overnight.
These officers have been assigned to our Democratic state representatives only to ensure that they get back to the Capitol to pass the racist maps and all the other legislation that they want that can harm and disenfranchise marginalized communities.
President Trump said Monday he'll soon sign an executive order banning voting by mail, calling the long-standing practice of fraud. Writing on social media, Trump also said he planned to target, quote, highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial voting machines, unquote. Trump's pledge came just days after he made these comments to Fox News, following talks and...
Dude, he's gonna get sued and lose when it comes to these, because so many media outlets and individuals have lost defamation suits, defaming the voting machine companies. People have lost in court before. Trump will lose as well. They should sue the president.
Alaska with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
You know, Vladimir Putin said something, one of the most interesting things. He said your election was rigged because you have mail-in voting.
Constitutional scholars have rejected Trump's plans to ban mail-in ballots and voting machines by executive order as a non-starter, as state and local governments are in charge of administering elections. Newsmax has agreed to pay $67 million to settle a lawsuit brought by Dominion Voting Systems over the far-right TV channel's repeated lies about the 2020 election. Following Joe Biden's victory, Newsmax personalities and guests spread the baseless conspiracy theory that the election results were fraudulent and that Dominion's voting hardware and software were to blame. The settlement comes more than 2 years after Fox News agreed to pay Dominion more than $787 million to settle
exactly what I'm talking about.
Case, so they didn't have to go to court. 2 more Republican governors have announced they're dispatching National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. to assist President Trump's federal takeover of law enforcement in the nation's capital. The additional forces from Mississippi and Louisiana bring the total number of National Guard troops deployed to D.C. to over 1,800. Vermont's Republican Governor Phil Scott has declined a federal request to send his state's National Guard soldiers. Meanwhile, Reuters reports the White House has dispatched social media teams alongside FBI agents executing arrest warrants to generate videos promoting Trump.
Get a load of this hog.
FBI agents executing arrest
he's a big boy.
warrants to generate videos.
There's no way he's physically fit to do jack shit. What in the fuck? Is this the National Guard? Had a pretty relaxing off-season, huh?
Trump's crackdown on DC. The practice.
I'm not trying to fat shame anybody. It's just I feel the same way when I see like a fat cop. You know what I mean? Like, aren't you supposed to be at least in some kind of good physical condition to do your job?
Justice Department norms against politicizing criminal investigations.
I don't know.
The social
What do I know?
Teams filmed and edited a video showing the arrest of Sean Charles Dunn, a Justice Department employee.
Welcome to the stream.
Who was fired and charged with assault after he shouted fascists at federal agents and hurled a Subway sandwich at one of them. A video of Dunn's arrest posted on X has garnered 2.4 million views. Trump's hand-picked interim U.S. attorney for Washington,
I don't condone this behavior, but it is very funny.
D.C., former Fox News personality Jeanine Pirro, celebrated Dunn's arrest.
And then he took a Subway sandwich about this big and took it and threw it at the officer. He thought it was funny. Well, he doesn't think it's
fascist Karen over here.
Today because we charged him with a felony, assault on a police officer, and we're going to back the police to the hilt.
In California.
Cool. Not to just pull a whataboutism immediately, but isn't there a better use of your time than throwing the book at a guy who threw a sandwich? Like, they just want to make an example out of anyone who does any act of defiance or any act of humiliation against the cops.
California, hundreds of people gathered for a vigil Friday demand.
It's the ongoing class war. This is a continued escalation.
Justice for 52-year-old Carlos Roberto Montoya, an immigrant from Guatemala, who was struck and killed on the freeway as he tried to escape federal immigration agents during a raid at a Home Depot in Monrovia. Montoya has lived in the United States for 3 years and was a day laborer. He has 4 daughters and grandchildren. His death comes as federal immigration raids have increasingly targeted immigrant workers, with activists condemning companies like Home Depot over their complicity. And the union representing thousands of striking Air Canada flight attendants announced early Tuesday morning it had reached a tentative contract deal with the airline, ending a days-long walkout. The agreement must still be approved by the 10,000 flight attendants who walked off the job Saturday demanding higher wages. The workers defied government-issued orders, deeming their strike illegal, risking fines and even possible jail time. This is Mark Hancock, president of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, speaking Monday in Ontario.
We're going to stay strong. We're going to stay committed to making sure that those workers can do the job that they love doing and actually be able to afford a roof over their heads, to afford caring for their families. And if it means folks like me going to jail, then so be it.
Well said, Mark. We love Mark.
If it means our union being fined, then so be it.
The tentative deal comes after about 8 months
Based
of
Mark.
negotiations. Air Canada is Canada's largest airline. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report.
I mean, besides the Gaza updates, it's pretty much a slow news day. I did want to check the resistance report from John Elmer. Not John Elmore.
Watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am John Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 678 of Israel's criminal genocide. I am recording this on the 14th of August. We'll bring up the first map as always, just so people can get their footing and understand the areas that we are going to talk about. I've told you on previous shows that Operation Gideon's Chariots had been essentially ended more than a month ago. I reported to you that there was
Welcome to the stream.
Gideon's Chariots operation was expressly an operation targeting buildings and not the resistance, but the resistance mounted more than 200 operations, qualitative operations against the Israeli military in Khan Yunis alone. That is the second battle of Khan Yunis, and of course, as I've told you, June and then July was more costly for the Israelis. Those are the two deadliest months in the past year of this battle. The Israeli military has now drawn down its force in Gaza by more than 2/3 have withdrawn after the end of Gideon's Chariots. There are now 5 brigades of the IDF in Gaza, which amounts to a single division, although they are spread out across 3 divisions. They just began a new operation in Zaytun in southeastern Gaza City that you can see up there on the top of the map. One of the areas that right around Gaza that you see, that's Gaza City. And Zaytun is just to the southeast of Gaza City. It's a neighborhood in Gaza City. That operation began yesterday, and already we're getting field reports of multiple Yasin strikes versus tanks and D9 armored bulldozers in Zaytun. There are still...
And Yasins are RPGs.
Israeli troops on the 2 corridors that I broke down over the past few months. The Morag corridor that divides Rafah and Khan Yunis down in the south of the map now there. We're looking up just north of Egypt. And also the Magan Os corridor, which is cutting Khan Yunis from east to west. And the Morag corridor cuts Rafah from Khan Yunis, Rafah in the south, Khan Yunis in the north. The major troop withdrawals this week have been from the eastern edge of Gaza City, where destructive operations were carried out over the past weeks in Tufa and Shujaiya in particular. And this week, at the end of last week, just after we went off air last week, the Israeli Security Cabinet met in a 10-hour meeting to discuss next steps. During that meeting, actually that meeting was preceded by Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, doing a media blitz in the United States, because that is the most important audience for the Israelis, because that is the country that is protecting Israel, supplying it with its weapons, and giving it its free hand to carry out this genocide, as we all know. But that media blitz by Netanyahu was saying that they were going to occupy Gaza, that they were going to attack Gaza City, western Gaza City, the Shati refugee camp, areas that they have not been, the Israeli military has not been in since late 2023, when, of course, they said they had operational control over that area. Israel...
That's literally the first thing that I thought about when I heard that there was the largest protest ever organized in Israel against the government. I'm like, they don't care what you think, even a little bit. They're not worried about you guys at all. All they care about is the American perspective of Israel. All they care about is American approval.
Started saying they had operational control over areas north of Gaza within 2 weeks of the ground war. These have been absurd statements that are always rebuked by the resistance at every turn, because each of these battles now in Zaytun, this is the 7th battle of Zaytun that is going on beginning today. But the 10-hour Security Cabinet meeting, the IDF Chief of Staff presented at that meeting. He and his forces are against the occupation of Gaza City. They're not interested in the fighting. They're exhausted. Their troops are exhausted. They have had 20,000 troops taken off the battlefield. That's more than 2 full divisions taken off the battlefield through injuries. And the Security Cabinet meeting ended up being an argument between the IDF chief and the political and Netanyahu's extreme right-wing government. IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir was pushed back apparently hard against the operation. And it's, again, like I said before, it's the exhaustion of the troops and their gear. It has nothing to do with the massacres of civilians or these aid trap massacres. But earlier this month, 19 ex-IDF chiefs of military intelligence, Amman, Shabak, the internal security, and Mossad external security chiefs, 19 of those chiefs made a video directed at Trump where they spoke English in the video, and a couple salient points from that video of those ex-chiefs, a number of them ex-IDF chief of staffs. They said, "We are on the precipice of defeat. We are now mostly offsetting losses to the resistance," is the implication. And of course, offsetting the losses is what they're doing with the demolitions. So the plan to invade Gaza City is going to be slow walked while they give troops a break. And in this interim period, some talk about the operation launching on October 7th. This is the kind of psychological approach the Israelis are taking to this kind of battle, drawing it to October 7th. And so we may have here a number of weeks of aid massacres from the air, but limited military maneuvers on the ground. During that 10-hour Security Cabinet meeting, Netanyahu told the IDF chief that his methods had failed to achieve the goals. Everybody is very consistent in Israel, in the security establishment, in the political establishment, and across Israel, that the operation has been a failure, a genocide, but a military failure. And senior IDF officials sharply criticized the Security Cabinet meeting to Channel 13, saying that the military is sinking into the sands of Gaza, something that the Qassam brigades and the resistance has promised since the first day of this operation. But there was an article in Yedioth Ahronot this week that caught my attention, that had the main source of it was Michael Milstein, who is the former head of Israeli military intelligence and the Palestine File. That article in Yedioth Ahronot said, nearly 2 years after Israel launched a war aimed at dismantling Hamas following the October 7th attacks, the movement remains the dominant force in Gaza. Despite the devastation of infrastructure, the assassination of top leaders, and a crippling blockade, Hamas continues to govern, fight, and even pay salaries. The endurance, that Yedioth Ahronot said, is not a coincidence. It's the result of an organization that has embedded itself deeply within the fabric of Gaza's society, adapted militarily, and evolved its financial tactics to survive one of the most intense conflicts in the region's modern history, and one of the most brutal live stream genocides that any of us have witnessed in our lifetimes, for sure. That's my point. That was not in the Yedioth Ahronot article, but that is just to give you a sense of where we are right now. Major drawdown by the Israeli military in Gaza, which will not affect the number of massacres, because those are done through airstrikes and artillery that Nora reported on so well at the beginning of this show. That won't change, nor will the massacre at aid sites change, which are, as Nora pointed out, more than 35 a day. But in terms of resistance and face-to-face combat between the Israeli military and the Palestinian resistance, I think we're going to see a period here of a slight lull in comparison to 200 operations in Khan Yunis alone in less than 2 months.
I'll be back.
Dozens, if not hundreds, of operations in North Gaza during that period as well. Let's take a look at map number 2, because I showed you this map last week. These are the genocide maps. These maps can be sent right to The Hague, and for anyone making files on this genocide, this map was updated this week. This is the United Nations Food and Agriculture Association map, and you can see damaged. It's showing you damaged and damaged crop sites, areas to grow agriculture that have been intentionally destroyed by the Israelis during this battle. This map is a little bit clearer than the one I showed last week. They published follow-up details to that this week, so I'm going to dig into that a little bit to show you just another way that Israel has been destroying the sustainability in Gaza that has been built over the last 2 decades of an intense military siege and blockade on Gaza, and Gaza making itself self-sufficient in many of these agricultural areas. And that's what you're seeing on this map. I'm going to show you the 2 next slides, show you the exact breakdown. It's really remarkable. Total damage to cropland as of the end of July in hectares. Northern Gaza, 93.7% of North Gaza has been destroyed. North Gaza was a major hub of agricultural activity, particularly Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia, but all across the eastern areas of northern Gaza were heavily relied on agricultural areas. The Gaza governorate itself, 91% destroyed. Deir al-Balah in the middle camps area, also an agricultural area, more than 85% of it has been destroyed. Khan Yunis in the south, again, wide spread out governorate Khan Yunis is, and its major agricultural areas, 81.3% wiped out. Rafah, it's also in the south. Agricultural areas have been destroyed by 80%, and it's only not more in Rafah right now because it's under Israeli control, and surely before they withdraw from there, they'll destroy the agricultural land, which is something they have done in every war of the past 2 decades, destroyed the crops as they were leaving. We've watched this all throughout the war, the way Israel has destroyed greenhouses as a goal of their operations. And this next slide.
Yeah, I think I've seen this already, where they talk about how there's, in reality, just 1% of usable cropland that's not damaged. Cropland available for cultivation and not also damaged. It's an incredibly small amount. Those little slivers of green you see in these larger bars here. Anti-Empire Project is another good channel to follow. We got John Elmer on here as well.
Okay, this is the sit rep for August 17th, 2025. John Elmer's here. Hey, John.
Hello, Justin.
John, we got your resistance report on Thursday, all of the Electronic Intifada live stream, as we always do.
How did you find it?
I mean, it's just beyond belief. Like the persistence of the resistance in Gaza the ability to continue delivering on these operations, it's like it's really mathematical where you can say where the Israelis go, they will be ambushed. Where the Israelis go, they'll take casualties and their vehicles will be destroyed. It's not. There's a chance. It's 100% reliable for 2 years now. It's incredible to see this.
And it's amazing that it's not amazing. It's typical that the Western analysis, even from the like expert class, is still unable to understand this and still frame it like, people in the BBC, they're like smart, the smartest people in the room people are like, all the resistance is able to do is, mount hit and run attacks as guerrilla force. You're just like, I don't know, man.
Well, what did you?
You have like 681 days of data at this point.
Yeah.
I could understand those kind of like buttoned up suits. Not really like maybe they weren't plugged into the channels that were putting these videos out. I watched that at CBC, like with Evan Dyer, their reporter, who was like, 6 months after the war, 6 months into the war, he wrote this post where he was like, I think he saw a video and he was like, I think that the Israelis might be shooting randomly out a window in this video. You're just like, okay,
Yeah, but
you've seen that
he's
for
lying.
6 months.
I'm sorry, he's lying because we know that CBC were in that plane where they took the same video of the destroyed aerial photos of Gaza just a week and a half ago, and one publication, I think in Britain, published it, and CBC was told not to, and they did. So
you know what? Everyone else did.
Yeah.
The BBC and CBC didn't, but everyone else that was told not to, they did, and they did it. They might not have done it in the moment, but they all did. Like even Sky News, like
it's interesting that you and me would be the kind of people who would be advocates of public broadcasting.
Oh yeah,
and yet it's the public broadcasters that are censored and the private broadcasters that actually aired the footage. It's remarkable.
Yeah, it's a dark time in media for sure, because this war in Gaza is the final nail in the coffin of the CDC.
Yeah. Who needs it? I find myself unable to make an argument in favor of humanity at this point, never mind United Nations or CBC or whatever. Like, if I was brought before the creator and told, like, okay, make the best possible case that you can for humanity here.
The loss of public broadcasting is going to
That's crazy.
devastating. But the reality of it today is good riddance.
Yeah, they self ruin themselves.
Yeah. And now everyone's admitting it's a genocide, right? So now now everybody who's not the CBC and BBC, they all get to come out and for when history reflects back on it, they can say, like, oh, it took me time or whatever. But the CBC and BBC can't do that. So they're going down in history as holding on to this line.
They're going to have to say we weren't following orders.
But they couldn't have followed orders better, right? Like to talk over guests who said genocide and say, oh, but we know the Israelis would dispute that term, which is literally what the BBC and CBC did at every single solitary instance of somebody mentioning that for the whole time. And I listened to them both. Shame on me.
No, I mean,
the CBC has basically been, there's no point anymore, but at least with the BBC, it's around the clock. World services at least round the clock. So you're getting at least world news, but it's been hard to listen to them. And the interrupting people who said genocide, it just looks so weird because it's like what
we're constantly saying Gazan instead of like making a point to say Gazan instead of Palestinian.
Right? The Israeli guests would talk. Oh, we don't think it's that. But
it makes my skin crawl.
They don't even need to bring the Israelis on. So, John, I just want to brag to our listeners for a second about this article that I wrote in 2009, and it was called "Turn Off the Canadian Media, Please."
Take your victory lap.
That was 16 years ago, and it was about Gaza, by the way. It was about Gaza. It was about the Israeli genocide in Gaza. So,
I remember that. Because there was also, just for listeners to know, there was also an era of Justin where you would meticulously take down everything a particular journalist had written, and just shock their sensibilities. Which basically every single time they reacted the same way, like you can't say that about me.
I'm a good one. I'm one of the good ones.
Yeah, they always said the exact same thing. And then Justin would say, as a matter of fact, I read 286 bylines since 1989.
Actually, you're worse than I wrote about you first.
Yeah, so the takedowns were one era, and then just forget it, turn it off was another era. And that was 16 years ago. Holy smokes.
Yeah. So now we're not the Canadian media, so so don't turn us off, you guys.
Yeah, we just happen to be born here.
Diplomacy front is not very successful. I just wanted a couple of statements from Hamas officials struck me as powerful. I don't know, worth quoting. They put these statements out for a reason. I thought I should quote them. One is from Hassam Badran on August 9th. He said, "We are not betting on unseen or intangible things. Our positions are based on a clear assessment of our people's interests formulated after consultation with the other faction." So the message here is like, we're not changing our demands to end the war, leave Gaza, open the crossings, end the siege. We're not gonna change those. So, and it's not because we're inflexible. It's because those are what we need to end the war.
Because they're the basic, bare minimum humanitarian requirement for the Palestinian people.
And then Osama Hamdan, kind of speaking, I think, to the various factions in Palestine and outside that are trying to just say things like Abbas said a long time ago, or others, Abbas being the president of the Palestinian Authority on what, year 20 of his 4-year term. And he said, just disarm already or whatever. And Osama Hamdan on August 10th, he said, if some think the resistance has the option of surrender, they are deluded. And if the enemy thinks it can force Palestinians to surrender, if its aggression continues, it is deluded. So I think that's a really important message for internal and external audiences that he says there.
Yeah. To surrender at this point, yeah, it's just not an option.
Israel doesn't accept surrenders, as we've been saying on the SITREP anyway. How hard has the Syrian new Jalani government been trying to surrender, and Israel just keeps bombing them and taking their land and taking their stuff? The Lebanese government has been trying to surrender on Hezbollah's behalf, and the Israelis bomb them. So it's just like surrender. I thought Osama Hamdan said that perfectly. He said we don't even need to talk about it because we don't even have the option. So
yeah, that is a good one. But they've also been saying the same thing all along, right?
Yeah,
and that is the thing that is different about Hamas and Qassam than previous iterations of the Palestinian struggle.
Yeah.
And they were formed to not repeat the mistakes of the past, and they're holding to that. And to not do it in the darkest moments, during the starvation campaign, to hold on at that time when that wouldn't have solved the situation anyway, but that's if starvation could lead to surrender, that is a disaster for the Palestinian experience.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. That's the ultimate precedent that you're setting. You're basically giving the Israelis every reason to starve you.
Yeah. Instead, what happened is they largely were, they're shown to the world starving, and has in a lot of ways, as it should, changed the tenor of many international actors in this because of how horrific it was.
Shall we mention Norway then? Norway, I don't know how much people know about Norway, but Norway is the European oil superpower, offshore oil, and they have the biggest sovereign wealth fund, I think, in Europe. And they put a little bit of the D in BDS this week. They announced that their sovereign wealth fund is divesting from various Israeli companies, and they've made it clear that it's because of what Israel's doing. So, BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and that's also been a campaign since 2005, I think, maybe a little bit around there. And the B, anybody can do. Anybody can boycott, even though you will face legal consequences for it in America now. Sanctions is, of course, the hardest. The only sanctions, I think, right now on Israel are effectively from Yemen. But D, divestment, that's the middle one, and that's also tough. Unions push for it, and lots of different organizations have pushed for it. But this is a significant step, and it was noticed, John, by Syed Abdulmalik Badruddin al-Houthi, who in his speech on August 14th, he made a couple of points. Gaza City, he said the announcement of attacking Gaza City is an escalatory step. Cooperation, he kind of praised the Palestinian armed factions for cooperation. He said this is among the most important elements of strength. He, criticized the Lebanon government. He said the Lebanon's decision turns the Lebanese government into a police force for Israel. And he said, come on, the problem is not the weapon of the resistance. The weapon of the resistance defends you, your freedom, your honor, your independence. The problem for our nation is the weapon in the hands of the Israeli enemy that kills children and civilians, destroys your homes, occupies your lands, and plunders your wealth. And then he mentioned Norway. In a way to shame other Arab countries, he basically said, while Saudi Arabia is shipping weapons and Egypt is signing gas deals, Norway is boycotting. So what's up with that?
Yeah, I noticed that joint operations room shout out by al-Houthi, and that's I think it's been a really interesting and important part of this battle. I mean, the other factions are fairly limited in their operations, and the Qassam brigades were established, they're not established, but built themselves into effectively a national army. And I think that absorbing the other factions into that national army is a very important part of the liberation struggle. And there's times where there's some of those factions that you weren't so sure that would be something that you would cooperate on, but they don't cooperate in any other ways, although the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, the Al-Amudi Brigade is, even them kind of distance themselves from the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. But yeah, I mean, there was a history in Gaza of real repression against the leadership and cadre of the Qassam Brigades. So that model of the national army, I guess, not to skip ahead, but is also at the heart of what's happening in Lebanon right now.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, in addition to the speech from Abdel Malik al Houthi and the usual Friday march, there were 6 drones that Yemen sent from their UAV force on August 12th, and I believe today there was a missile, a Palestine 2 ballistic missile targeting Tel Aviv airport.
Yep.
So Yemen is still in the fight. Now, I guess we can talk about Lebanon.
And they got bombed today by the Israelis, and the Israelis.
Tel Aviv was bombed?
Again, they bombed the power.
Media blackout on that shit. Jesus.
To impact the whole population.
In some
as
right?
they do. Yeah.
I guess it's tougher for the Israelis because Trump. I mean, I guess that the American participation in these bombing raids has to be relatively low key. I doubt the Israelis can do this by themselves. But
well, they did it with this one. They did it with a warship, so that's. Yeah, I mean, they seem to be able to do them on their own, but they're fairly limited, and at some point they're vulnerable. So, yeah, it's not clear. This was, I wrote it down. 14th time that they've attacked. 14th separate time they've attacked. Obviously, more than 14 strikes.
That's just the Israelis?
That's just the Israelis alone.
Yeah, because the Americans would be in the 50s, I would think.
Yeah.
That's 2 years. Okay, so Lebanon.
So Lebanon.
Obviously, the Lebanese government, I believe August 5th, announced, we've both got, I mean, it's been covered in EI, it's been covered on the SITREP, but they announced that they told the Lebanese army to draw up a plan to disarm Hezbollah, and some of these politicians were pressed on the issue, and they said, no, Hezbollah has to disarm, and they said, journalists asked them, well, how do you plan to defend Lebanese sovereignty from Israel, and they said, well, disarm it first, and then we'll talk about that. So totally empty-headed puppet kind of behavior. The president of Lebanon, I think today or yesterday, said something really rather ridiculous. He said the Americans basically said, we were not threatened over the possibility of rejecting the American proposal for disarming Hezbollah. The Americans simply said, if you proceed with the proposal, that's welcome. If not, Lebanon will no longer be among our priorities. Really. So that's why the U.S. built the largest embassy in the world on a gigantic multi-football field compound, because Lebanon is not among their priorities. That's why U.S. satellites and the place is crawling with U.S. spooks and spies, because Lebanon's not among their priorities.
And even as if that's a bad thing if it wasn't among their priorities.
That would not be the greatest gift you could give Lebanon, is not being among their priorities.
So what I was saying about integrating into the armed forces, and I said previously that about Lebanon, is that this is the thing, is that the Lebanese government is not offering to integrate Hezbollah into the Lebanese army. They're talking about taking their weapons away. They're not talking about absorbing them into a national army that can defend itself.
Which happens a lot in the world. There are lots of
And I think it would be something that Hezbollah would be
open to.
Yeah, that would be a difficult thing to say no to if it was done in the proper way. It's the higher level realization of your national liberation struggle. And that's the point that then I was linking it to the way that Qassam operates, is that to not let these kind of political differences get in the way of what ultimately is the goal, which is to have a national army that defends your territory.
Yeah, that's where they're supposed to go. Meanwhile, Syria is headed in the opposite direction.
And Syria is the example to look at this, and it just should make it the most obvious time to any person in any part of Lebanon, because it's not like if Israel attacks Lebanon, they protect the Christians, or that the bombs don't fall on.
Yeah, I mean, they were trying to do that, weren't they?
They tried.
They were trying to do that towards the end of the September 2024.
They try, but if you're going to destroy us, I mean, and that's one of the things that Israel didn't do, was destroy the Lebanese state this time. But that's what happens in an open conflict. So it hurts everyone in the country when, So the idea that you would want to give up that capacity, and in fact, you would almost think that these collaborationists it would be more likely that they should want to bring them into a national army, but they don't, because their only goal is to negotiate surrender.
Yeah, whatever they're told. Their only goal is whatever they're told. I mean, there are some among them probably that are savvy and think they can get a better deal by playing the two sides. But for the most part, it seems fairly disciplined self-destruction and surrender. I want to read Naim Qassem's speech, though, at length, because there are lots of... I would say it's the toughest speech. He's like the
no question.
Yeah, the toughest talk, let's put it that
question.
way, than he's ever had. So a bunch of quotes. I'll just go through some. Everyone must know that Palestine will remain the compass. Whatever Israel does today, from starving, killing, and destroying the people of Gaza and the Palestinian people, whatever America does in sponsoring this dangerous deviation, this vile, aggressive, sinful assault, will not deter the Palestinian people from continuing, from strength, from maintaining a resistance. There's a fair amount of Shia religious reference that I have not studied properly still. I know a little bit about this battle, and the slogan that far from us is humiliation, but I really don't know as much as I should about this, and I'm sure people will berate me in the comments, and also probably patiently tell me about it in the comments. I'm hoping for more of the latter than the former. my brothers and sisters. So I'll continue. Do not be afraid. Do not fear them. They are cowards, incapable. They know they will lose everything if they destroy Lebanon. Stop living in this intimidation, claiming that you are preserving Lebanon. You are not preserving Lebanon. You are preserving your own.
They are cowards. Well said.
Lives and positions, even if it means eliminating your partners in the country. Is this partnership? Is this patriotism? And then I think this is one of the lines that Nasrallah would say too. He said, if you feel incapable, and you are, then leave the enemy to face us. Do not confront on our behalf. Just be silent, sit aside, and leave us be. Ouch. He said, Netanyahu declared he wants greater Israel, meaning all of Palestine, parts of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. He says it now in the intoxication of victory and the overwhelming American support for this tyrant. Some Arab states wish not even to condemn, but to simply remain silent, at least not to secretly support Israel by attacking the resistance and aiding in striking it. In any case, this government has taken a very dangerous decision, violating the Charter of National Coexistence, exposing the country to a major crisis. The legitimacy of the resistance comes from blood, liberation, right, and land, not from you, and it does not need you. We have postponed protests, but if it is imposed upon us, we are ready for it, and we have no choice but to face it. The resistance will not hand over its weapons while aggression continues and occupation remains, and we will wage a Karbala-like battle if necessary, and we are confident we will win this battle and proclaim never to humiliation. So, this Karbala battle.
Anytime you hear of a ceasefire negotiation proposal come forward that involves disarmament of the Qassam brigades, or anyone standing up for Palestine, or the Palestinians themselves, it's an unserious, no-go proposal. Cannot defang yourself when you are surrounded by the occupation. And the occupation better lay down their arms too, which they won't do. So, what are we talking about?
Basically stood up against the Umayyads despite being massively outnumbered, and and said, "Far from us is humiliation." So it was like a fight against overwhelming odds and martyrdom and courage. So these are all the values of that they go to when they're faced with an enemy like Israel or the U.S., whatever. So he says, and then he says, either it remains or we remain together, or farewell to everything, and you will bear the responsibility. So that's also a very clear.
He has not spoken like this.
That's what I felt. Yeah. That's what I felt. And like there was something about like the sharpness of the backdrop, it was a different feeling.
Yeah. I mean, he had the toughest act to follow, and just, I think that there's certain elements of this. I mean, this is obviously an literally existential moment for them.
Yeah.
But it's also something that, he's getting into the job.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now over to occupied Palestine. I mentioned to you, I wanted to conclude by going over some of George Abdullah's quotes from the interview he did with Palestine Chronicle. I thought it was an amazing interview, but let's do a bit about Gaza, West Bank. In terms of West Bank, I mean, Jenin and Tulkarm both announced the 200th day of Israeli raids and siege of those two cities in the West Bank.
Yeah, just devastating. And they've carved up both of Jenin and the Tulkarm refugee camp have been carved up in the way that was Israel's desire all the way back to the Second Intifada, when they want. I spent a lot of time in Jenin, and in the camp. I mean, this is the whole thing about the Palestinian struggle: is the refugee camps are packed.
Mm-hmm.
They're just a series of alleys, and it's very difficult for a fighting force to move through it. And that is the story of the Israelis in Jenin, is getting constantly hit by these ambushes and significant operations that don't allow the Israelis to just hide in their tanks. And so they've always wanted to carve up, to have roads, essentially tank-wide roads that would go through the camp, and the camp has always defended and rebuilt to prevent these widened roads. And that was a big thing about the rebuilding after the 2002 destruction in the camp, which came about because of an operation in an alleyway that killed a number of Israeli soldiers and led to to them doing what now is just their normal disposition, which is just wipe out the entire camp because of a single military defeat. But it's just very, so that's been, my whole life watching this, and to see this week and last week really were the 2 weeks we saw overhead, photography of the two camps, and it's just, the Tulkarm one especially.
Can you imagine being so cowardly that you just demolish an entire camp because you sustained a military loss? You decide to annihilate a bunch of displaced, defenseless people because you got by a fair and square military defeat.
All right, welcome to the show, y'all. We have a lot to get to today. So in just a second, Trump announced that he's deploying the National Guard in Washington, D.C. He's federalizing the D.C. police force. He's basically declaring war on the homeless population. So we'll talk about that. I'll give you a whole bunch of important information. Then we'll get to a terrible story of a legendary journalist who was killed by the IDF in a terror attack. I'll give you that breakdown. They are so brazen, man. They do not care. They know there's no consequences. They know there's no justice. They know nobody's fighting for the right side of this thing. So they're just going balls to the wall. We'll talk about that. We'll also get to an amazing new Epstein story. You do not want to miss this story. Wait until you hear this new fact we just learned about just how close Trump and Epstein were. It's gonna blow your mind. So hang in there for that. And then also a town hall erupts in boos at a MAGA politician, and he's quite literally booed off stage. And Pete Hegseth went full Christian nationalist, and he's now promoting this extremist pastor who openly declares that women shouldn't have the right to vote, and we should take that away from them. So there is a lot of stuff to get to today, and I'm not even... Let's go ahead, without any more interruptions here, let's go ahead and dive into it. So Trump came out the other day, and he said the following. This was a bit of an eye-opening moment because I was like, uh-oh, where's this going to go? He says, we're having a news conference tomorrow in the White House. I'm going to make our capital safer and more beautiful than it ever was before. The homeless have to move out immediately. We will give you a place to stay, but far from the capital. The criminals, you don't have to move out. We're going to put you in jail where you belong. It's all going to happen very fast, like the border. We went from millions pouring in to zero in the past few months. Total lie, by the way. This will be easier. Be prepared. There will be no Mr. Nice Guy. We want our capital back. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So as soon as I saw that, I went, uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. We are not getting the whole story. We're only getting a little sliver of it. This is the cover story. Well, what the hell are they planning on doing? Then, of course, we get this. He says, this is now yesterday, he says, Washington, D.C. will be liberated today. Crime, savagery, filth, and scum will disappear. I will make our capital great again. The days of ruthlessly killing or hurting innocent people are over. I quickly fixed the border. Zero illegals in the last 3 months. D.C. is next. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay, so... Now you're beginning to see a little more of what's going on here. Now he's not just talking about homeless people. He's talking about liberating Washington, D.C., which, by the way, totally ironic that he brings up crime, savagery, filth, and scum, because, of course, it was Donald Trump who brought us the January 6th riot where he and his thugs tried to overturn the election. There were a whole bunch of criminals in D.C. You pardoned them, including the violent ones, 1,200 of them. So right off the bat, that annoys me. And this is just so dishonest how he's framing it. So what we learn is what Trump is going to do is send in the National Guard. And he's also going to federalize the D.C. police force. So he comes out, this is just, an hour or two ago now, and here's what he says.
We're here for a very serious purpose, Something's out of control, but we're going to put it in control very quickly on the southern border.
Yeah, we've seen this. It's an ICE conversation.
COVID or the Black Lives Matter protest, and, the changing the guard from Trump to Biden. That was the only time where, you'd be in D.C. and you look around, it looked like a post-apocalyptic landscape where you don't see anybody else anywhere, but you see a whole bunch of military vehicles and you see, people with guns. And you go, oh shit, this doesn't feel right. This feels very bizarre. It feels bizarre. Well, now we're going to get that, potentially on steroids. But I got one more for you. So here is Brian Baez did a video on this, and I agree with his conclusion that he comes to here. He's going to lay out one of the things that's going to happen as a direct result of this move from Trump.
Breaking news, Donald Trump is about to deploy 1,000 National Guards to D.C., and this all comes after he demanded that homeless people immediately move out of Washington, D.C. On Truth Social, he said, I'm going to make our capital safer and more beautiful than it ever was before. The homeless have to move out immediately. We will give you places to stay, but far from the capital. The criminals don't have to move out. We're going to put you in jail where you belong. He literally proposed moving homeless people to high-quality tents on inexpensive land outside of cities while providing access to bathrooms and medical professionals. In other words, high-quality tents on inexpensive land that's outside of cities and has access to medical professionals and bathrooms.
So for everybody just listening to this podcast style, he was showing how what he means is he's going to send these people to Alligator Alcatraz. And what he means is I'm going to send these people to the other concentration camps that they're now building across the country. Of course, they've sent people to the Gulag concentration camp, Sikot in El Salvador. They sent them to Guantanamo Bay. They want to send 30,000 people to Guantanamo Bay. They're sending people to Alligator Auschwitz, where, by the way, we learned officially that there's torture going on there. And now he's going to send these people to other makeshift concentration camps. That's what's happening. So understand something. The idea that this is like, oh, we're going to help these homeless people. Absolute nonsense. If anything, this is akin to, this was the beginning of the Nazi crackdown. They went after homeless people. And it's the same mindset. Shove them in camps, fuck them, forget about them, whatever happens, happens.
This is straight out of the Nazi playbook. Homeless people were among the groups targeted by the Nazi regime and sent to concentration camps. The Nazis implemented policies against those they considered asocial or work shy, which included homeless individuals, beggars, and others who didn't fit their vision of productive society. Under Nazi ideology, homelessness was often viewed as a character flaw or moral failing rather than a social problem. And yes, they in turn were sent to concentration camps labeled as undesirable. And here's the worst part. He says, I'm going to make our capital safer and more beautiful than it ever was before. But in order for him to do that, the homeless have to move out immediately. Basically saying that homeless people make the city less safe and ugly, which means they're lowering the value and the quality of the state. Because their playbook has always been the same. It is the dehumanization and vilification of a group of people to be able to justify why you're segregating them and expelling them from fucking society.
That's exactly right. And, this is why I keep telling people, I don't want you to say, oh, we're on the brink of authoritarianism, we're on the brink of fascism. This is something that we've heard from a lot of people. It's a very common saying when talking about Trump and this regime. But it's time to graduate from that talking point. It's time to graduate from that. No, it's here. It's already here. And I don't know how much more evidence anybody would need in order to conclude that it's here. When you have ICE Gestapo thugs covering their faces, rounding up innocent people, sending them to concentration camps, no due process, no habeas corpus, no hearing, no anything, a lot of these people end up being American citizens, a lot of them end up being legal immigrants. When you have that going on right in front of our eyes, and that continues, and you have courts say, hey, stop it, and then they don't stop it. When you have the invasion of LA, when you have the National Guard occupying it, the Marines occupying it, and now he's doing it in Washington, D.C., when you have them out in the open, trying to rig the next election, and trying to steal more Republican seats, I don't know what else you would need. I mean, when you look at the foreign policy front, too, Trump just signed something the other day, a directive that says we're going to go to war against the drug cartels in Latin America. That's greenlighting war with Mexico. That's what that is. So threatening Greenland, now greenlighting war with Mexico, bombing Yemen, bombing Somalia, and of course, illegally and offensively bombing Iran on behalf of Israel. We got all this stuff going on. On what planet are we on the brink of something? No, it's here. It is here. And it's horrible to see, man. It's horrible to see. So they're using the cover story of, oh, we're going to go after homeless people. But it's not like they are going to go after homeless people. They're going to round them up. They're going to send them to these concentration camps. But that's only part of the story. It goes a lot further than that. It goes a lot deeper than that. In the same way that we've seen these ICE raids all across the country where innocent people are getting rounded up. It's the same thing here. It's the same thing here. And it's power for the sake of power. It's control for the sake of control. It's I can do this because I can do whatever the fuck I want. And there's nothing you can do to stop me. And shame on fucking anybody and everybody who goes.
Yeah, if you're a cop or a soldier right now, just resign in shame. Resign.
Stop attacking our cities to hide your administration's failures. Last week, Boston received a letter from the Attorney General of the United States on official letterhead from the federal government threatening to prosecute city officials and withhold federal funds unless we cooperate with carrying out mass deportations. At a time when this federal administration is already causing so much fear and harm in our communities, these threats are serious and consequential. But our same communities have told me, loud and clear, that silence in the face of oppression is not an option. The U.S. Attorney General asked for a response by today. So here it is. Here is our response. Stop attacking our cities to hide your administration's failures. Unlike the Trump administration, Boston follows the law. And Boston will not back down from who we are and what we stand for. We will not back away from our community that has made us the safest major city in the country and a leading example of why cities around the country make this country safer, healthier, and more prosperous for all Americans. To all the federal officials attacking communities.
I mean, in most cases, I would be pretty nauseated by the idea of an appeal to legality for your argument. But Trump is such a criminal that it's more or less, in this case, appealing to a desire to maintain a fabric of society, or what little we have of that. I think I'm gonna leave it there for today. Kind of. Yeah. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Take care. Fuck Israel. Free Palestine. And if you want to support the channel, like the video, and subscribe. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.